Hey, well, good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Dudgeon, and as I was introduced a few moments ago, I'm the superintendent of Mount Rainier National Park. I've been in that position for just about 2 years now, and my wife Susan and I, actually, most of you probably know the woman who lets me live with her. She volunteers at the hospital once a week, and she and I moved down here a little over 2 years ago from Alaska, which is where I spent almost 40 years doing what we're going to talk about right now, and that is planning like a park ranger. You know, in 1983, I graduated from college and was looking for something to do before I headed back to get my master's. And I made the decision to go to Alaska. I had the opportunity to work at a place called Glacier Bay National Park. And while I was not working for the Park Service, I did have the opportunity to volunteer for the Park Service when my day job was over. And what I was doing was going out with the then whale biologist for the park. And at that time, they were just learning that humpback whales' tails are just like our fingerprints. They're all different. And so the biologist was going out into the bay and taking photographs on calm evenings of whales' tails as humpbacks dive, their flukes, their tails show. You get a photograph, and they were starting to get a history of different whales that would come into the park and where those whales could be located. And over time, it was hoped, and what eventually did happen was they were able to get a sense of what whales were traveling into what part of the park when, and then where they would go in the winter. And my job, since I knew how to run a boat, was to boat that biologist around the bay so he could get his photographs. So imagine, you know, a college-age kid given the wheel of a boat in a place like Glacier Bay, chasing whales, and it was sort of like, why would I go back and do what I was planning on doing? I'd like to work with this outfit. And that's essentially how my career at the National Park Service began, just a few years ago. So when I was asked if I could come in and talk, just to follow up on the presentation before, you know, getting out and about is so critical, right? And let's start with a question. If we were to talk about a place that had 3 national parks, 8 national forests, 17 national wildlife refuges, and about 45% of the landscape was either state or federal public lands, what would you call that? Yeah, you'd call that Washington, wouldn't you? We have an amazing front yard, backyard, and side yard here. We need to get out in it. But to do that, we want to do so safely. And so we can get back to do more of it. So that's why we're going to plan like a park ranger. We're going to talk about the 10 essentials. So the 10 essentials were actually a list of things that going out into the back country or even in the front country that on a routine trip would be a really wise thing to carry with you. And these items might not be necessarily all that important on a day hike or during a beach trail, but then again they can be. If you've been following your newspaper or news stories recently, you might have heard about the 2 Tennesseans that went to Alaska, actually near where Susan and I used to live, just north of Fairbanks. They went to hot springs and decided they were going to take a little break and do a loop trail. 8 days later, they were found, both still alive, not by much, however. And again, that was just a short little jaunt they were going to do on a looped, maintained trail. So having the 10 essentials with you, whether you're on a multi-day trip or even a partial day hike, is a great idea. Let's talk a little bit about those essentials. So the original 10 essentials were created in the a list was created in the 1930s by the Mountaineers. How many of you are familiar with that organization? A few of you. The Mountaineers actually were established here in Seattle, a group of climbers and outdoor adventurers. And in order to help themselves and others to be safer, they came up with this list of essentials that they messaged were important to have with you when you went into the field or the backcountry. And they included a map, sunglasses and sunscreen, headlamp, flashlight, fire starter, a knife, compass, extra clothing, first aid supplies, matches, and extra food. And over time, that list sort of evolved a little bit from a list of items to a systems approach. And so today, whether I'm going out into the field or one of the folks that work for the park is, or perhaps if you're going out for a partial day on a trail or a multiple day trip, to plan like a park ranger, this is the essentials systems as it's evolved today. So one of the very first things we want to talk about is navigation. Not always are you going to be on a maintained trail, or not always are you going to be in a place that perhaps you know or are familiar with. And so having one or some of these things with you is ideal. If you're going to be in an area that you don't know, or maybe an area that you do know, but you're planning on more of an extensive walk, having a map is always a great idea. Of course, if you've been to the park, you've seen one of our unigrids, or park brochures. And it's not only something you'd want to navigate by, but you can certainly orient yourself as to where you are, where you're located, and the direction that you're headed with the map that's on that unigrid. Compass is always a good idea, of course. A lot of people these days don't carry a compass with them because they've got their phones and they can navigate with those. But of course, phones take what to run? Power, right. And eventually that power goes away. Having a compass that's not powered is always a great idea, and particularly the one I have has got a small mirror on it, and that can be used for signaling. A GPS device. When I was in Kotzebue, living north of the Arctic Circle, we started using handheld GPSs, some of the very first that started coming out. We would wire them into our snowmobiles, and that way they would not only stay powered, but we could also keep them warm at temperatures below 30 below zero. And you know, originally, or initially I should say, some of the locals really didn't like or care for the idea of GPS. Matter of fact, they called them elders in a box. Knowledge that we had that had not been gained through experience. But I had an opportunity once where an elder who lived 18 miles across the pack ice in a place called Cape Cruisenstern needed to go home, get home to his dogs, and he had been stuck in Kotzebue because of the weather. And he came over and he said, "Hey, I hear you have a way to get me home." And I wasn't quite sure what he meant by that. And then he said, "Those elders in a box." I said, "If you can tell me," and the weather wasn't great, but I said, "If you can tell me that pack ice has no leads, direction we're going," I said, "I can get you there." And he said, "It's all," he said, "everything's solid." So we took this elderly gentleman and his wife, and I was in the front. We put them on their machines in the middle, and then a ranger that followed me. And we used our handlebar mounted GPSs to get him home at Cape Cruisenstern. And after that, it was seemingly almost everybody wanted to buy a GPS and learn how to use them. And we ended up traveling to all the villages in Northwest Alaska to show people how to use this new and evolving technology. An altimeter watch is always a good idea. I tend to use mine not so much for elevation, but it helps me keep track of the weather. And of course, barometers, as the weather changes, will change. And that helps me keep track, and my colleagues keep track of what's going on out there around us. Helps us keep in tune with the weather. And then again, a personal locator, beacon, or a satellite messenger. And some of these things may seem like overkill, but again, I think about this couple on their Loop Trail walk. They're in outside of Fairbanks this past week. And had they had just one or two of these items, how different the story might have been than the 8 days they found themselves in the wilderness. So maybe I haven't convinced you that taking a looped trail or the hike in your backyard would require some of the items we just talked about. I would like to have a long conversation with you about some of those items. This is a shot by the way by one of the parks I just left. I was the superintendent at Gates the Arctic National Park and Preserve, and you can see why some of the instruments or some of the systems we were just talking about would have been helpful in wilderness that was over about the size of Switzerland, 15 million acres in total, or about 12 million acres in total. So I am going to try to talk to you into at least including these items to come as a part of your 10 essentials systems. One, of course, being a headlamp, plus extra batteries. You know, headlamps, of course, we're used to carrying flashlights, those of us who maybe have a few more tree rings. But how helpful is it when you've got a headlamp on and you've got you're walking with trekking poles, maybe you're cooking, you're trying to put your tent up at night, or you're trying to make repairs. Having a headlamp makes all the difference. So think about that the next time you start to pack a day pack for your trip out, your John out. Having a headlamp can be invaluable. Another item, our items is sun protection. Now, the gentleman here that was in Northwest Alaska was using a traditional form of sunglasses that the Inupiat used. And either they would take caribou horn or some sort of mammal bone and create slits so they could look out over the pack ice and the sea ice. And even in the winter at low light conditions, being out too long in the sun could cause snow blindness. But not just for your eyes. You want to make sure that you're taking with you additional sun protection for your skin and even for your lips. So whether you're selecting a sunscreen or a lip balm, you want at least a SPF of 15 and even 30 is even better. And we make sure that, again, that the folks that are working in the park, or that when we go out to recreate, that we're including as a part of our 10 essentials, the kind of sun protection, whether it's for our eyes, for our skin, or for our lips, for health reasons and safety reasons as well. Probably don't have to say it to this particular audience, but include a first aid kit with you. And of course, depending on how long you're going to be out and the type of trail you're going to be working on, or you're going to be walking along, or the kind of trip you have planned will determine, and the number of people with you will determine what you carry with you. But at the very least, you should assemble some type of first aid kit, medical kit. And if there's some kind of pharmaceutical that you take or prescription that you need to be having, take that and take a little extra, just in case. Going on with our systems of our 10 essential systems, you always want to include a knife, and maybe perhaps even some sort of small toolkit with you. The gentleman in the upper right used to work for me in Kotzebue, and we had the challenging situation of putting an airplane down on a sandbar and going in to do work and coming back and having found a brown bear, having gone through the side of the airplane. Now, you may not ever run into that, but fortunately, because of the small toolkit we had on hand, which included things like duct tape, there was some plywood near the camp where we were staying. We filled a duffel bag full of gear. We used our knife to poke holes in the plywood, to use some parachute cord to tie it around the framing of the airplane. And then, of course, we duct taped the rest, and were able to fly the 75 miles back to town to where we could get it really repaired. So having a knife and having a small toolkit, again, adapted to the type of trip and the type of terrain you're going to be working on. How many of you ski? I have a few skiers in here, so you've got ski poles. Having something to split those together or to replace a basket should not go missing or broken while you're out. Again, part of the essential systems that are critical for having out there for safety purposes, safety reasons. And of course, everybody would probably consider or think about fire making ability. You want to have something that you can strike a flame with, and you also want some fuels available that could make sure that if you get a little spark going, that you can get the flame, you can get the fire going that you need. You know, one of the very best things I've found over the years is to take the lint that you get out of the dryer, put it in a baggie, maybe put a little candle wax with it, and it's almost automatically a fire maker for you. You don't have to have anything fancy. Though again, if that's your druthers, that's fine too. Just have it with you. Have it in your backpack. I included this photo, the need for heat sometimes. We'd be going to backcountry cabins, and you can see we were able to get this cabin up to just about 60 degrees inside. But if you open the door and went outside, you can see it's 50 below. I don't know how many of you have ever seen a temperature difference depending on what side of the door you're on, but you can see why, and a visual reminder that having fire in a way to make yourself warm is critically important. Even if you're not in the Arctic, as we know here, wet and damp just kind of comes with the territory. Included in your 10 essentials. And then shelter. You know, we often think about being, when we think about camping, we think about a tent, we think about tarps, but you know, shelter can even be an extra large garbage bag that you put inside your day pack. And if it starts to rain, you can make a poncho out of it. If you get into trouble, you can crawl into it, stay a little drier, stay a little warmer. But have some kind of shelter with you to help protect you not only from the elements, but perhaps from insects as well. A big part of the natural environment, of course, sometimes includes the smaller organisms that can be bothersome or either unhealthy, depending on, again, the conditions and the place that you're recreating in. So include shelter with your 10 essentials. And then wrapping up, always have a little extra food with you. My nephew likes his nerds by the cereal box full, and that may not necessarily be what you would want to include. But think about a favorite food. Think about a high energy food. Think about something that can help fuel you and also keep you warm when you're out and about. On a multi-day trek, or say in winter or colder weather, consider bringing along additional days worth in case there's an incident, accident, or you find somebody out there that perhaps wasn't as well prepared as you were. And then along with food, you want to carry extra water. It's really important to keep in mind that most people need about a half liter per hour during moderate activity outside. And so we always carry extra water with us. Having a water bottle and or a filter, something that you can, when you find a natural source of water that you can filter, drink it safely. Having both with you are part of that 10 essential systems that can, again, make the difference in terms of a fun day outdoors or one where you run into a situation that maybe is a bit more challenging than you would intend. Extra clothing kind of goes without saying, but you want to make sure that you're prepared for the conditions you expect to run into. That may not include or need polar bear pants, like our friend Dremel here has. But again, depending on the conditions you're going to be in, the terrain you're going to be recreating in, you want to be prepared and you want to have a little extra with you, particularly if you have the possibility of getting wet. Just today, I was in the park with the deputy superintendent. He said, hey, do you bring an extra jacket? And in that case today, I did not, but he wished I had. And along with extra clothes, maybe I got ahead. No, that's right. We're good. So along with those extra clothes and the 10 essentials that we've included in your pack, as you probably, many of you probably know and maybe have experienced, things can still go bad, right? You can be as prepared as possible, and maybe sometimes conditions or climate or things happen that you find yourself in a situation that you weren't maybe truly ready, either mentally or physically, to encounter. And so what we like to remind each other to do is a 4-letter word. Of course, there are a lot of 4-letter words you can use in that kind of a situation. But the one we're going to use, and the one I'd like for you to try to remember, is stay. When things go bad, you want to stay. You want to stay put. If that couple in Fairbanks had stayed put, they would have been found much sooner than 8 days later. They kept wandering. And as they kept wandering, they wandered away from help rather than towards. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know where they were. Stay put. Stay visible. Make sure that as you're staying put, that if you've got some color, whether it's in your tent or your coat, I like to actually travel with, one of the things I include in my toolkit and my day pack is surveyor's tape. That bright orange tape that stands out. And a lot of that in a tree or on a bush, wafting in the wind, can be seen from a long ways. Stay sheltered. Again, stay warm, stay dry as possible. Having that extra large trash bag in your day pack can make a big difference. But stay sheltered, stay hydrated. Make sure that you're drinking. And maybe just as importantly, if not more importantly than the other stays, is to stay positive. And then the final slide I think I have here for us for this evening is that to plan like a park ranger, you need to plan. And so if you're going to go out and about, leave a record of that. Make your plan and then write it down. Leave it in your car, leave it on your kitchen table or your counter. Even better yet, tell a friend where you're going and where that plan is located so that if for some reason you don't come back, you get delayed, people are concerned, they know where you are, and they know what your plan was. Even better yet, take a friend. It's always safer when you're out there with a second. And we almost always patrol with at least one other person, have that safety second, that backup. And don't forget to have fun. Find your park. As I mentioned earlier, we have 3 national parks, 8 national forests, 17 national wildlife refuges, and 45% of Washington state is public lands, state or federal. Lots of places to go stay and play. So go out, find your park, and enjoy yourself, but don't forget the 10 seconds. And with that, thanks so much.